Good afternoon. I was starting on mute, of course. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We have a learning session on unlocking resources, leveraging federal funding through nonprofit and municipality collaboration. I'm Catherine Mercier-Baggett. I'm the Director of Federal Technical Assistance with the Southeast Sustainability Directors Network. Before we get started, let's just go over a few housekeeping items. So first of all, the webinar is recorded. Please keep yourself on mute. We have now, I believe, 50 some participants. So yes, please stay on mute. There is closed captioning that is available, so you can turn on transcription at the bottom of the screen if the slides are preventing you from seeing the closed captions. Please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, organization, and location. If you have any questions for our panelists or ourselves, you can put them in the chat. We will be monitoring that. And before you leave us today, please take the time to fill out our evaluation form. I will put the link, and I will actually be putting several links in our chat over the course of this webinar. And I will now let Campbell introduce herself and the River Network.
Hi, everyone. My name is Campbell Simmons. I'm the Resilient Communities and Policy Associate here at River Network. I am based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on Lenape land. And yeah, for anybody who's not familiar with River Network, we've been around for about 30 years. And we are a national organization who connect and strengthen the network of water, justice, and river advocates working at various levels across the country. One of the ways that we do our work is by hosting virtual information sharing and training sessions just like this one. And we encourage you all to fill out the evaluation form so we can incorporate your feedback into future sessions. And we'll share that in the chat in just a second. I also wanted to share, oh, for some reason, there we go. For this group, I also wanted to share River Network and Water Now Alliance's building blocks of trust resources on creating authentic and equitable relationships and partnerships between community organizations and water utilities. So we'll be talking about the partnerships of community-based organizations and local governments today in this webinar. And many of the principles shared in this toolkit apply to this conversation as well. So I encourage you all to explore this resource. You can scan the QR code. We'll also drop the link in the chat. And we are actually looking to expand the building blocks of trust and add case studies. So if there are any particular stories that you know, especially of community-based organizations partnering with local governments, et cetera, to access federal dollars, you can reach out to me. And yeah, we'd love to hear your stories and share them. And I'm going to pass it back to Catherine to introduce Southeast Sustainability Directors Network.
Thank you. SSDN is a network of more than 120 members across 10 of the Southeast states. We connect local governments, sustainability professionals throughout the region to accelerate, scale, and implement sustainable best practices so that communities are better equipped to equitably adapt to and mitigate climate change. So we provide peer-to-peer learning, state policy engagement, and assistance to access federal funding. And by the way, Michael Dexter, our Director of Federal Programs, is here with us today. Next slide, please. Thank you. So specifically, I represent our Multimedia Environmental Finance Center, which is funded by EPA to provide technical assistance to access federal funding. And I would also like to highlight that SSDN is also a local infrastructure hub through which we can provide resources to apply for various federal grants. So for more information, please see our website and don't hesitate to reach out to either Michael Dexter, myself, or anyone at SSDN. And lastly, I want to point out that there is a centralized request form for technical assistance that relates to water projects. This is the extremely long link that I have on this slide, and I will put it in the chat. I believe we can move on to our next one. Thank you. So the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act bring an unprecedented amount of funding for climate resilience projects coming from the federal government. Many of those opportunities are open to nonprofits and community-based organizations, and others require municipal governments to apply themselves. So strong partnerships between the two types of entities can unlock mutual benefits, including access to additional funding opportunities. So we are joined today by three wonderful people with insight and experience navigating these types of partnerships. So we will shortly introduce you to three people. First one is Romona Williams. She's a leader in social and environmental justice. She is the executive director of the Mississippi Communities United for Prosperity. It's an organization dedicated to equitable solutions to climate change. And she was previously with Metro St. Louis Coalition for Inclusion and Equity, also called MSLICE. Casi Callaway, our second speaker, joined the city of Mobile in Alabama as Chief Resilience Officer in 2021. She was the first one to hold this title in the state of Alabama. She has 30 years of experience in environmental advocacy, including executive director of Mobile Baykeeper. So she understands firsthand the importance of collaboration between both sides. And she is also an SSDM member. And then finally, we have Camille Crane. She is Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, also known as BRIC, Section Chief in the Hazard Mitigation Assistance Division at FEMA headquarters. So in this role, she led the design and launch of the BRIC program, and now she oversees, its implementation. She has over 20 years of experience with FEMA's HME grant programs at several different levels. As a reminder, please submit your questions for the panelists in the chat. And now, Romona, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, SSDN, for always being there for us. And just briefly want to share with everyone in the audience that SSDN is the reason that MCUP even exists. They funded us to do some flood mitigation work and to implement a model called Achieving Sustainability Through Education and Economic Development Solutions, ACEDS. So I am very prejudiced towards SSDN and am a testament of the work that this wonderful organization does. I'm going to talk about a project that we're working on in Jackson, Mississippi, where I live. And MCUP has been working in 3 communities using actually the Duck Hill, Mississippi model for mitigating flooding and building a sustainability infrastructure in 3 communities in Northeast Jackson that flood profusely. And we coined these communities, 3 communities, 1 common agenda. There are 4 different neighborhood associations. Those neighborhood associations were not talking to one another. So we wanted to focus on how could we bring communities together in order to address and to solve a common issue. And in these 3 communities, that common issue or common agenda was flooding. So we have been working in the community for over a year now. We are partnering. Our key anchor institution that we are partnering with is Columbia University. And we have had 3 cohorts of students at Columbia. The first cohort focused on building, working with community to create a comprehensive communications plan so we could get those communities to talking to one another. The second cohort focused on actions that we needed to take around looking at the city of Jackson, looking at its flooding history. And there's been several flooding major flooding catastrophes that have happened, but also looking at how the government is working and how it responds to emergency disasters. As you all may know, the state of Mississippi is a climate denier state. So we have lots of work to do. Fast forwarding, since I only have a short period of time to share this story, what you see, the flooding in these communities come from the Pearl River. And when the Pearl River reaches its capacity, it spills over into a reservoir that was built, but it was not built for flood mitigation. It was built for recreation and also to be a water supply to the city of Jackson. And the communities have been flooding. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is working on a program that's called the One Lake Plan, and we view the One Lake Plan as more of an urban renewal strategy than a flood mitigation strategy. So we work with community. Columbia University has been working with us, and we have now developed a sustainability plan for these 3 communities. However, we looked at the broader city of Jackson through the lens of equity and sustainability. One of the projects that we did with Georgia State, was work with their CIS students and engaged in a asset mapping project. In that asset mapping project, we bumped into 178 acres of land that is owned by the city of Jackson in a floodplain, and it is not developable. At that time, it was the environmental and the community change and resiliency technical assistance funding opportunity came, and we applied for it. And our project was to look at the feasibility of converting this land into a nature preserve in order to help mitigate flooding from a nature-based perspective. And we were successful. And we were granted a team of landscape architects, SSM, in New Orleans. And what you're looking at here is a part of the 148 acres. You can jump to the next slide, and you can see it's abandoned. So in February 22nd, we had the site visit. We had a charrette. Engage strategic stakeholders and also community. Then the architects went back and they did their thing and they started working on this the design. And this is what the design is going to look like. You can go to the next slide and let me know when my time is getting short. So as you can see, we are looking at nature-based development, but we also wanted to look at it through the lens of conservation. Okay? So we've got trails, but we're going to have trails, we're going to have biking, it's going to be handicap accessible, it's going to have a children's park, and we're going to make our community more sustainable through making it more active and through active living, and also through socialization, tearing down barriers along racial lines. The next one, please. So this is what we're going to present this project to EPA for the community change grant and funding in order to build this out. You can go to the next one. And you can see there's an overlook, and the white that you see, that is a sandbar, a beach that runs along the Pearl River. So we're hoping to bring it back and everything, the nature play station for the children. It's amazing. The next one, please. And and it is going to be accessible. We're looking at the various types of surfacing to make sure that people who have mobility issues and that they will be able to easily navigate the grounds. The next slide. And the concept is to have a one-path network with many experiences, looking at fishery, looking at outdoor recreation, the whole thing. And you can go to the next one, and I think this is the last one. Yes, so this is what we are envisioning when we when the project is finished. So how do we work with the city? The land is owned by the city, and we need to have the city's buy-in in order to successfully carry this project out. The city of Jackson is very unique. We have many challenges that we are dealing with, from our water quality to just overall quality of living and life. So we are building those relationships. We're using on this Thursday, we will be presenting the plans to the community, the broader community at large. And we will be presenting them in a one-on-one meeting to the city council member who represents the three communities. And we're hoping to get his buy-in. And from there, we will move forward with the project. But we're going to move forward with the project whether the city gets on board or not. So one thing is for sure, they will get on board as it moves forward. So I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share MCUP, share our work, share our testament of SSDN and how they have been so loyal to us as an organization, helping us to build ourselves from zero. So thank you for allowing me to share.
Jump in?
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you, Casey.
Hi, everybody. I'm Casi Callaway. I'm the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Mobile. Ramona, that was wonderful. That just is a gorgeous, gorgeous project. I'm excited to see it come to reality. I have spent my formative years being an advocate, being a community-based organization. So I want to talk to y'all about how can communities work with CBOs and nonprofit and advocacy organizations from both sides of the aisle. I'll tell you that I don't think that I necessarily set myself up for huge success working in local government for how I treated local government outside of the building. So I want to warn you right off the bat. You can build really good and important and lasting relationships within your local governments that can make a huge difference. And we did a lot of that good work as well. So I'll start with that. So from Mobile Baykeeper, one of the very first federal grants that we ever got was a coalition grant we did called Litter Free Mardi Gras, sorry. And Litter Free Mardi Gras looks like. And you may not know, but you need to always be reminded that Mobile is the original home of Mardi Gras. And I know there's a place in Louisiana that has it too, but whatever. What we did is Mobile Baykeeper, my organization at the time, we looked at what happens. And we figured out that all of Mardi Gras beads were going into one receiving water, all down the storm drains into a river that led into a bigger river that led into Mobile Bay. So we worked with the city and created a plan to retrofit all of our storm drains along the parade route. And we did a little bit over time. That grant helped pay for it. It was a NOAA marine debris removal grant. Yes, it was a NOAA marine debris removal. It had lots of partners, but predominantly we could never have done it without the city. So the city doesn't want Mobile Baykeeper or any nonprofit organization, or frankly, any community group at all to go in and touch a storm drain. That changes the dynamic. It can create flooding issues. It can do a ton of really serious, and it can do more damage than good, no matter what we're trying to do as a community organization. So working with the city, we were able to help them figure out, well, we helped pay for it, but then they did the installation. So they were our match. Their folks wanted to know how to do it. We put we retrofitted entire storm drains in several areas. And then we also put grates on that were removable so that you could put it on for Mardi Gras that caught the smaller things and then take it off when the magnolia leaves and the oak tree leaves would gum up a storm drain and gum up those leaves and cause more flooding in the street. So it was a real working partnership. We did that several times. One of the things, Dog River Clearwater Revival, Mobile Baykeeper, Mobile Bay National Estuary Program, we all worked with the city of Mobile to create a litter education campaign. How do we remove and eliminate litter? That was done over a couple of years, grants written together, applied for together, contracted together. Each of us having to work really hard to understand, how do you document your time? How do you document your dollars? How do you need me to document my dollars? What kind of contract do you need? In each case, it was always a learning curve because local governments do things differently than nonprofit organizations, do differently than the federal governments who are writing these grants. So making sure that you're creating a roster of, you must do this, you can't do that, and everybody being on board up front as early as possible in the process, saying, what do I need to do and what do I never need to do? That's a big chunk of the hard part of getting a federal grant, getting a partnership with a local government that can be meaningful and make significant and long-lasting change for your community. The city of Mobile, with that big, how do we solve litter in the city grant, that was incredible work done by these 5 organizations, turned it into something that you'll now see on the city of Mobile's webpage called Litter Free Mobile. It is a simple shortcut, and it's pretty way of looking at how do we stop litter, that also engages people across all of the different agencies and partnerships. So you have a role for local government, you have a role for a regular citizen who goes on a nightly walk with a kitchen garbage bag, and you have a role for businesses to get involved. But it's always about, and now I'm turning a little bit more to what do we do from the government side, but this is what the government needs to do, is make sure that we don't think we can solve everything all alone. And the more we build and reach out to develop partners, the stronger we'll be, and the more effective I think we'll all be. So I'll stop there. So I've got a little bit of from the community-based organization side, a little bit from the government side, and then I'll turn it over to Camille. I think you're next.
I am. Thank you, Casey. And I appreciate Ramona and Casey both talking about their experiences and projects they have going on from both the nonprofit and really at the ground and the local level. I'm going to give you a little bit of different perspective, in that I'm so excited I was invited to talk about a federal grant program. So I am as Catherine said, the section chief or program manager at FEMA for the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, or BRIC, grant program that also has a technical assistance initiative under it. So we both offer grants as well as hands-on technical assistance. And it's in the realm of natural hazard mitigation. So you heard Ramona talk about flood mitigation. That's the type of work we do across all natural hazards, and trying to address both the risk of climate change as well as do it in a way that is supports equitable outcomes. We are a Justice 40 program through the Biden-Harris administration. So we do it with the lens of trying to ensure at least 40% of our benefits serve those that are disadvantaged, which has shown those also have a exacerbated or will be affected larger by natural hazards. So if you've heard about the BRIC program, just to give you an update of where we are in our cycle, we are currently reviewing our 4th year of grants and requests for technical assistance. We are very much oversubscribed. I had $1 billion of funding last year, part of that through the IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And we got $5.6 billion of requests. So it shows the big need there is in this country for this work, which is why partnerships are so important. One federal grant program is not going to be able to solve all the needs in this area on its own. And so that's one of the reasons why when we founded the BRIC program so many years ago in 2020, we did it with 6 guiding principles. One of those is really to promote partnerships. We understand the federal government cannot do all the money that we have available, even with historic investments currently that are happening. We're not going to be able to fix all the needs in the country, and we shouldn't be doing it on our own. There's a lot, like if I have a focus in my program on infrastructure, a lot of that's owned by the private sector. So there has to be partnerships if we want to get this country where we like it to be as far as being able to withstand the ravages of natural hazards. So right now, we are in the middle of reviewing those $5.6 billion of applications and more than 160 requests for technical assistance with a hope, or a plan, I should say, and make those selections in this summer. At the same time, we are putting together our FY24 Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO. That will then also have an application period associated with it, which will be our next funding opportunity. So currently, I don't have an open funding opportunity, but should in the next few months, probably coming sometime this summer as well. To understand a little bit more about what's available in the program and who can apply for it. So the program BRIC basically has three main funding buckets under it. So as I said, I had $1 billion available last year. Part of that is what we call state and territory allocations. So last year that was $2 million available to every state and territory, as well as the District of Columbia, to both do what we call capacity and capability building projects, as well as mitigation projects. One of those project types we can fund under that allocation are partnerships. We did a large stakeholder engagement back in 2019 before we built the program, and we understood the importance of partnerships. People said, I need more partners. I don't know how to get partners. So one of the things we can actually do is fund that work. And so we can fund the work for communities, states, tribal nations to then figure out how do they bring partners together to do larger efforts in their community related to climate resilience. The second piece of our program is a tribal set-aside. So federally recognized tribes can apply directly to FEMA and to BRIC. And so while they don't have in the law an allocation like states and territories do, last year we put $50 million aside just for federally recognized tribes. We also last year, for the first time, we have a priority in our program to fund building code work. We know that is foundational to a community's safety, or I would say resilience to natural hazards, and only about 40% of the country has mandatory building code adoption. So we wanted to be able to offer our stakeholders or our applicants the ability to have a dedicated funding source to both research, adopt, enforce building codes. Then in our national competition, which is the bulk of our funding, and we by law have to have the majority of our funding go to a national competition, which is mainly focused around infrastructure mitigation projects. We have, while the partnership is not eligible as a project cost, or is not eligible as a project type, I should say, in the national competition, our national competition recognizes the importance of partnerships, and in our competition criteria actually gives points for leveraging partners. We see that as when you're putting these large scale, when I say large scale, we have a $50 million federal share cap for these projects. They need to be done in a way that brings people in the community together to support that work. And so we offer points in our competition to assist with that. It's very important to recognize who are eligible to actually apply for the BRIC program, because nonprofits are not an eligible subapplicant or applicant to our program. So in BRIC, the people that can apply to FEMA include states, territories, the District of Columbia, and federally recognized tribes. And then those folks that can apply as subapplicants, mean they apply to an applicant like a state, include local government organizations, other state agencies, federally recognized tribes. So it's all the governmental entities. But the work that we do in a lot of cases is on private property and is with others. So once again, that's important. Another reason why partnership is so important. So while a nonprofit cannot apply directly to the BRIC program, they can certainly partner and assist a local government in putting applications together and then implementing projects. One part of our program that I also want to talk about is our BRIC direct technical assistance. So our BRIC DTA is a piece of our program that has nothing to do with dollars, and it looks like it is technical assistance at the local level. We built this as a very small thing in our first year. I think we chose 8 communities and tribal nations around the country. In our second year, we chose 20 more. In our third year, we went up by 40 something. And this year, We are be working right now with, we are in community with about 74 communities and tribal nations. And this year we plan on selecting another 80. We want to get to a place where in any given year, we're working with about 300 communities and tribal nations around the country in helping them build their capacity and capability to achieve natural hazard mitigation. This was something we purposely created when our stakeholders said, sometimes I don't have the capacity to put a grant application together. So this is an opportunity for them to still get assistance and build towards having that capability and capacity. So with that, that is my quick and dirty on the program, and I'll put a link to our website where you can find a ton more information in the chat. And with that, Catherine, I think I'm turning it back to you.
Thank you so much. Actually, Campbell will be taking it over. Thank you.
Wonderful. So we're just going to start our Q&A now. So we have a couple of questions for you. And folks, if you're in the audience and you want to ask a question, please drop it in the chat and we'll try to get to it. But the first question that I had for you through here is just, what are the main advantages for both community organizations and municipalities when partnering with each other to pursue federal funding opportunities? What are you able to do together that you might not be able to do otherwise?
Me to go first? Well, I'll say a couple of things. Is I think that, you know, again, when I was at Mobile Baykeeper and we were the giant $1 million organization, which was giant, and I'm still super proud of that. But at the city of Mobile, that $1 million is like what we spend on toilet paper every year, some ridiculous thing. I'm not belittling that under any circumstances. I'm talking about scale. So what you can do, I mean, that project that Romona has put forward can't easily be done with a nonprofit organization. You need that scale of big dollars. The other thing is that your local governments have this, they have engineers on staff, they have environmental people on staff, they have grant writers sometimes on staff, but they have also those compliance folks who can really help make sure that you're dotting every I and crossing every T that's needed with the federal program. I think, you know, there are a million other ways that you can build and strengthen the relationship, your effectiveness as a nonprofit organization or a community-based organization too, by building stronger relationships with the staff in the city government. There are so many brilliant people that work in city government, and most often when you're yelling at somebody, you yell at the mayor. When you thank somebody, you thank the mayor. The mayor is a 4-year term and most other folks who work at the city are there for years and years and years, and they do the really down and dirty hard work. So I would say too, you're going to get the opportunity to apply for more grants by building relationships with the staff.
I agree. You know, I'm accustomed to working with the local government because, for instance, CDBG is a formula. Those CDBG funds, it's either going to come down for small states. I come from an urban background, but for small states, it goes to the state. But for entitlement cities like the city of Jackson, those CDBG funds come directly to the city. So having, as Casey said, having that relationship and healthy relationships with the people who work for the city, because they are career folks. They're going to be there. That's who you build the relationships with, you know, in order to, and cities need nonprofit organizations. They need community-based organizations, but community-based organizations also lead our local jurisdictions, right? So I agree 100%. I look forward to the time that we can work with the city of Jackson, to move it in a direction where it is more sustainable. MCUP's the very core of our organization is to create healthy, thriving, and sustainable communities. That's it. And what we have to do, we have to be very creative, right? We see it, and I see it through the lens of community and economic development, because that's the space I come from. And so we need the city to be able to sign off on and provide those letters of support and letters of commitment Often funders look at who is the first funder. They may not want to put those first dollars in. The city can put those first dollars in through CDBG, especially if we're working in LMI communities, low and moderate income communities. So that's I don't see how we can't do this. Fortunately, under IRA and many of the other funding opportunities that are out here now, you know, cities need nonprofit organizations, they need community-based organizations. So it is worth it to the city to make those investments in our communities so that we can have the capacity to help them do a better job at what they're doing, which is serving their town, the constituents.
Concur. And, you know, one thing I think about as I'm a former state employee before I worked with the federal government. And so more that I saw on the ground there, but even in this position at FEMA headquarters, there's ways that I see that community-based organizations and nonprofit are really assisting the local governments in figuring out, particularly, we have a focus in our program on nature-based solutions. And so for some communities, that's a new conversation, right? To move away from gray infrastructure and move towards a more green or natural infrastructure. And so I've seen a lot of nonprofits that have that as part of their mission, who've gone into a community and really said, okay, here's an opportunity for a grant for you need to mitigate, or you see this as a risk. Let's think about different ways to implement that project instead of, you know, just pouring concrete. And so I've seen the really assistance that, like, we can't do that amount of outreach, that like nonprofits can really go into community and offer that type of conversation and really talk to local government officials about why the spend is worth it. Like why that kind of project is worth the maybe extra couple dollars it's going to cost to implement. I've also seen our program, and a lot of federal current programs have match requirements. And so I've seen nonprofits be able to, like ours is generally a 75% federal, not 25% non-federal. And I've seen those organizations either provide or help find funders to a community who may not have the funding to fund that 25% or 10% in some cases, but 25% most of the time non-federal share.
Thank you so much for those answers. That was so thoughtful and insightful. The next question that I have here is just, where do people even start? Who initiates these kinds of partnerships?
I would say it's both and. I mean, in all honesty, most of us need to be cultivating relationships with our local governments. Everybody does. So every nonprofit organization should be building that relationship and building that bank of people you can go to. I mean, they're the ones who pass ordinances that protect our community. They're the ones, you know, that local governments can be your best ally. So I think they can, you reaching out, building those relationships so that when they see a grant come across their desk, they'll be the one sending it to you. If you see a grant, that the local government can do, send it their way. I think it's certainly a two-way street, but I don't think anybody should be waiting on anybody else to get started. I also want to take a second to echo what Romona said at her start. Organizations like River Network and SSDN, I spent a long time being a big fan of River Network. Y'all taught me a lot of the basics of how to run an organization. And now SSDN has taught me how to be a chief resilience officer, which is not in my wheelhouse before I got to know those guys. And those organizations like that can also be a really good help. They can give you the tools and the resources you need to figure out how to start a conversation, broker a conversation, work through a grant opportunity.
And I want to add on to something Casey just said, because I think that's important. While we have points in our competition for leveraging partners, we in no way think that you can start that partnership on a large infrastructure project when the funding opportunity opens and have it all ready and an application written in the 4 months when it's due later. I know from those first crop of applications that were selected and for funding, I could tell when I read them, they had been working on this for years in developing this kind of network in their community to help get to this solution. So I echo that it's never too soon to start. I wouldn't start to the funding up. I wouldn't wait until the funding opportunities come out. Yeah.
I agree. I think it is, we use the collective impact model, and it is all about building and cultivating and culturing relationships. You know, you can't wait. It's just like taking an exam. You don't wait till the night of to start studying for the exam and think you can cram it. You can't cram relationships, right? People have to build trust, and that's very important and a key um, element to any successful what I refer to relationships with the city and other strategic partners as joint ventures, because we have to come together and entwine ourselves and connect ourselves together in order to get the job done. And so where does that begin? As Casey said, it's bipolar. It goes both ways, right? Sometimes the cities have to engage because HUD says that they have to meaningfully engage, right? In order to, during their time plan and everything. However, community-based organizations like our organization, for instance, you know, we understand that if we need to get things done in our communities, that we need to build relationships with our elected officials. But we also have to hold them accountable, right? And we have to make sure that they are going to help them to be the best that they can be in order to serve the needs of our communities. And when they are not doing that, then we have to take them to the shed, right? How do we take them to the shed? Election day. So it's a push and pull. You know, sometimes our local officials do things that just simply are not in the best interests of our communities. And then we have to use and take corrective measures so that they can see that they need to do better. And when they learn better, we expect them to do better.
Thank you so much for those answers. We somehow only have 15 minutes left, so I'm going to get to some questions from the audience, and I have some specific questions. And the first one is for you, Ramona. What is the cost estimate for the Pearl River Nature Park?
We will find that out on this Thursday. We will be doing what we're calling the plan reveal. You know how they have the baby reveal? So we're doing a reveal, and we'll find out what the estimated numbers are on Thursday. We're having a design charrette where the broader community we show the broader community the design. So we're kind of estimating it at being between 10 and 15 million. But we'll see what the estimators say.
I have another question for you from the audience, which is just, are you working with the city government to apply for the community change grant? And if so, how are you structuring that partnership? Would the grant funding support staffing at both the NGO and the city?
I do not, I think what she's referring to, I think is the statutory partner, and we are looking at another entity to be the statutory partner, simply because the city is going through some transitions right now relative to the planning department and the city engineer and also the public works person. So Jackson is being faced with some challenges. So because we want to move this project forward, and we know that we have a short window of time because the availability of these funds are up in November. So we're going to move forward, and we're looking at and two other anchor institutions to be our statutory partner on the project. But we will need to have the buy-in of the city because it's city-owned property. So we're just hoping to work through those things, and we hope that process is going to begin on Thursday when we meet with the city council member.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that answer, Ramona. This next question I have is for Camille. Can you speak more about nature-based solutions funding under BRIC? For example, restoring riparian areas can provide natural flood attenuation and wildfire break benefits, often much cheaper than gray infrastructure. Could eligible entities seeking to implement natural infrastructure like this be competitive with gray infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also just put in the chat a link to FEMA's website, and I think you guys are going to gather all the links. So thank you for doing that. But FEMA has produced a few different guides for local governments related to nature-based solutions. So nature-based solutions is a priority of the BRIC program. And what that means is in our national competition where we do the infrastructure projects mainly, our point system is built to support our priorities. So for example, if the solution you're proposing includes nature-based solutions, and we have kind of a tiered points depending on how much versus basically the level of the level that the nature-based solution covers, you get points based on that. So if you look at all other things being equal and considered, in this point system, if it is a nature-based solution project, it's going to score higher than a gray infrastructure project. Our priorities relate to, and our points relate to infrastructure, the use of nature-based solutions, building code adoption. We have a large focus on points for economically disadvantaged rural communities, tribal communities, as well as community disaster resilience zones and CJES through the Justice 40 effort. We have points related to resiliency effectiveness and climate change, and then partnership and outreach.
Wonderful. Thank you for that answer. I have another question from the audience. We are working with some municipal government departments who have received federal grants for community-based work, but have no experience passing through funding to nonprofits to serve as contractors to do some of the outreach and community engagement work. Do you all have sample MOUs or agreements that outline the relationship between city government and nonprofits and how the funding flows from one to another? And somebody followed up with sample contracts for statutory community grant partners would also be appreciated.
I think I can start this one. So I think every municipality does this a little bit differently. And so if you're in a government and the government can't figure out how to pass through money to a nonprofit, it's a contract. It's a simple contract. An MOU would work too. In the city of Mobile, it has to be a contract. So we use our standard performance contract language, and then I go in and I fill in the scope of work and change the name of the organization and some pretty simple stuff. And I'm happy to share that with you. There are some requirements that are hard, in all honesty. You've got to have an insurance policy. So, and the insurance policy has to have these riders that protect the city, which can be painful for a smaller nonprofit organization, but most folks can get these. Most board of directors for a nonprofit organization has most nonprofit organizations have some kind of insurance. So being able to just show that insurance need to your carrier can be the simple piece of it. Sometimes, especially at first, you need a lawyer to look it over. The city's going to say, if the world blows up, we're fine and you're on the hook. And so, a CBO might do the same thing. So that's just nature of protecting yourself. Every community-based organization needs to carefully read whatever the city or municipality or partner gives you and make sure it's fine. The other thing I will tag in there is don't assume that because the city presents you a contract that is the only thing it can be. Make your suggested changes. Say, I don't want to do it that way. I'd like to do it this way. I'd like to get paid that way. I will give you this kind of information to get paid for it. It's a negotiation and a contract conversation. So always know that you can negotiate what will work best for your organization. We're going through one right now. We got a NOAA, will be a NIFWIF, derelict vessel removal, and we've working with a local nonprofit organization to have them do the outreach and education. So I'm working on one right now. First organization I talked to was like, I can't do that kind of reporting for you. And I said, well, then tell me what kind of reporting you want to do. It scared them. And I can't necessarily always write it for them. I don't know what they want, what's best for them. They ended up passing it on to another nonprofit organization who knew enough to say, no, I want to do it this way. So I want to give you all that teaser up front. Tell us how you want to do it. Tell us how you want to lead, and we will get it to you. I mean, you know, it's got to be a negotiation and back and forth. But I'll send it to y'all what we have as our basis so y'all can share and see what works for you.
Thanks so much for that, Casey. Yeah, I have one more question for you all. I've heard that NGOs and other partners can find it difficult to come up with matching funds for federal funding programs. What are some innovative ways communities have come up with local or state match?
I'll say a few different things that I both experienced when I was at my state days as well as now. One is understanding the grant program and what can be included as the non-federal cost match. One thing about like our program is it doesn't have to be cash. So it can be in-kind services, donated labor, donated materials. When I worked for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, for example, most of my communities or a lot of my communities couldn't afford the cash, but we could work with, for example, companies to get materials donated, and those have a cost, or get their hours that they were going to use their staff to implement the projects. So there's other ways usually than just having a cash match that could be considered for a lot of these federal grants, at least ours. And then also there are federal grants that lose their federal identity at the state level that can be used to match with other federal grants. So my program cannot, but some of HUD's like CDBG, Appalachian Regional Commission, other grant programs can be used as match because when they go down into the state level, they lose that federal identity.
Cool.
I'll just throw in too, it's volunteers. Volunteer service hours, huge, huge, huge. All you have to do is track them. You have to get their name, you have to get the time they start and the time they leave, but man, that is a huge dollar value that you can easily add on to anything you do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for those answers. We only have 5 minutes left, but I do want to ask one more question just because this has been going so well and your answers have been so amazing. But last question, what is your most important piece of advice to establish a relationship or for successfully working together?
I'm going to say organizing if you're working in community, if you're working in neighborhoods. Cities are made up of neighborhoods and communities. And I would just say start organizing first, build the trust of the people who you are advocating for or who you say that that you're engaging with, and view them eye to eye, right, as a peer, and bring them to the table. Often we have to create the table, right? Because we're not invited to the table. So sometimes we have to go in and we have to turn the tables over and then build a new table. So that's what I would say. Just start with organizing, start at in the wards with the city council persons or the aldermen and everything. If you're in a rural community, with the county supervisors, and build power. Power building is just so very important, and I don't care what level you're at and working at. Build power. Get people in the community excited and educated. When people learn and when they know, they get excited. They get excited. So I would say that's what works for us.
And I'll tag in and just tweak it slightly from the government angle too, is when you're building relationships, with your city government, you got to recognize that they likely have been burned before, and not from some awful experience or something you might have done, but they have a mayor or a leader for X amount of time. And when new one comes in, everything they built can be undone, overturned. So they get a little jaded about change. So they, as we, sorry, I'm only 3 years into this, so I'm still not fully we, but so when you buy them lunch and have a conversation with somebody in local government and they tell you a story, it's their story. So make sure that same building power that Ms. Romona is talking about is keep that. So retell the story that the person told you from that is their story, or more importantly, if you shouldn't tell that story, don't tell that story. Keep that confidence, build that relationship, build that trust. And then every time you can, when you're talking to the mayor, tell the mayor how great that staff person was. When you're talking to the newspaper, tell the newspaper how great that staff person was, not just the leader at the top.
I really appreciate both Romona and Casey's statements there. And the only thing I would add is to understand, I think this a lot goes to Romona, which talked about the organizing. Part of that organizing is really understanding what's in it for each party. Like as you're going there and you're trying to build that relationship, and I really appreciate talking about trust, but what is going to turn them on? What is going to get them excited about having that conversation, that they're going to want to take the meeting? So they understand that it's not just whether you're the government or the nonprofit, you're not just coming there trying to pull benefits for you, but you're really creating a mutually beneficial relationship that is going to help them achieve whatever they want to achieve. And I think that's true whichever way you go. Whether you're government to nonprofit or nonprofit to government, is you've really got to do that. And this is my new saying for everything, and do it all with an amount of grace and patience. There is a lot of things happening right now in the world. There's a lot of opportunity we have in the federal government right now with a ton of money. We all need to be approaching everyone with grace and patience, that we are but juggling more than we have time to juggle. And so don't get upset if it takes a minute to make the next thing happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those answers all. Thank you, Camille, Casey, Romona. This has been so wonderful. And thank you everybody for joining. Before you go, I just wanted to share last few resources with you all and just a few updates. Please remember to fill out that evaluation survey. Also, if you want to continue following the conversation, you can subscribe to River Network's monthly e-newsletter, River Voices, and join our Mobilized Advocates Forum, and subscribe to Southeast Sustainability Directors Network federal funding newsletter. We also have a Water Smart Grants info session and discussion on Tuesday, April 30th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard. And last reminder about River Rally, which is right around the corner coming up in May. But thank you everybody so much for joining. Thank you again to Romona, Casey, and Camille. This was such a wonderful webinar, and the resources and recording will be shared in an email after this meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you, Campbell. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks so much, everybody. It was great.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.